Hello,
Please.
I'm Annette Anderson, and I'd like to welcome you to the Center for Safe and Healthy Schools. Today, we have one of our most esteemed colleagues here in the School of Education to talk with us about the impact of the coronavirus, or COVID-19, for schools. I'd like to introduce Dr. Bob Balfanz to our conversation today. Bob is the director of the Everyone Graduate Center, and he's also a professor here in the School of Education. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Annette. Glad to be here.
Thank you. So we'd like to start by talking a little bit about the impact of the coronavirus on schools. But I know that aside from talking about the direct health impact, I'd like to also talk about some of the tangential effects for teachers. Can you talk a little bit about how preparing for the coronavirus can be stressful for teachers and school staff?
Sure. Think about it. I mean, teachers want to teach.
Yes.
They want to be with their kids. And yet now they're told maybe being with your kids could make yourself or your family or your neighbor sick, or maybe make you be quarantined for 14 days. So that's going to create anxiety, as it does in all of us. And what's challenging is teachers are already giving their all to the work. They're already overworked and underpaid.
Absolutely.
And this is now asking them to even go above and beyond and deal with additional stressors. So we just have to, be aware of that and help them out, understand they're going to have this anxiety and stress. And if you see a teacher, thank them for their job and ask what you can do, because they're under a lot of stress. And then the other thing I think we need to think about is this perhaps spreads some more. Fortunately, hopefully it won't, but if it does, we could get into a thing where some people are staying out just to protect themselves. Some people are staying out because they think they might be infected. The school is still open. That's going to create a need for subs. It will probably be impossible to get a sub to come into that school.
And many schools already have difficulty
It's
getting
hard to get a
subs
sub in any case.
Absolutely.
And what that means is the remaining teachers are going to have even extra pressure because they're going to have to cover those classes.
Yes.
Which is really exhausting for teachers.
Well, it's also dangerous because sometimes those classes can grow to double the size that they are scheduled to teach.
So we really have to think about some of these unintended consequences that our teachers are facing.
That's unfortunate. On the flip side, what could some of the stressors be for students in some of our schools as some of the anxiety rises about the potential for coronavirus to come into a school?
Well, they're going to have the same. They hear the news, they see their parents. They feel that stress, and we know from the learning sciences that learning takes focus. It takes effort. And if you're distracted by something else, you're not going to learn as much. So
for students who are already stressed and perhaps academically are not able to perform at capacity, do you think that the advent of this in our schools is providing more stress for the students as well? Or are they? Yeah, I think there's actually two groups of kids we have to be really concerned about. There are a subset of our schools are very high needs. Literally 80-90% of the kids need a good lesson every day and something else. And they depend on that school for and something else, which could be 2-3 good meals a day. It could be access to someone to talk to about mental health issues. It could just be a place to have a warm roof over their head if they're homeless. And it's often a place to get their work done because they may not have the right environment outside of school to get their work done. So when they miss school, if they have to because of a quarantine or school is shut down, yes, we can think of ways maybe they can make up their lessons and their work through various means by Zoom. But we got to be really concerned about is all that other stuff where the school was a lifeline for them. And be really thinking for these kids, how are we providing those other services? The food, the shelter, the access to mental health, the recreational programs that they're not going to get just via video means. And for students who are highly vulnerable, for example, students who are at risk of dropping out, like the students that your center serves, does it seem like the risk would be even more elevated for them to be further disengaged from school? Would this break, do you think that that will be further disengaging? There's within this group, two groups to be worried about if, let's say, for example, school had to be closed for any amount of time. The first is our ninth graders. We know from the evidence that getting through ninth grade, what we call on time and on track, which means getting passing grades and the classes you need to get promoted to 10th grade on time, is critical, more or less make or break for high school graduation. If you're not in school and you're just having to do your lessons via home or over the internet,
you will be getting the instruction perhaps, but not the support, not the help, not someone who could explain it to, not someone who can sit down with you and help you get through it. And therefore, you might not get your assignments turned in as well as you would in school. And therefore, you might get failing grades and knock yourself off track to high school graduation. Even more pressing is we're going to have a set of high school seniors that have to pass classes this semester to graduate. Their credit, they don't have all their credits yet. They have to earn credit second semester or they don't graduate. They're going to be in the same boat. Yes, you would think they'd be highly motivated, but students that live in challenging circumstances, pure motivation is not always enough, absent the additional supports and helps they need to get their work done when their home life is non-supportive or chaotic. Or think about, there's a subset of those kids who are homeless.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Where are they even going to go to get the Zoom connection,
Absolutely.
to get
the hotspot?
The hotspot. And so it's, again, we have to think about, especially in urban areas, this idea of supplying hotspots and computers is going to put more challenging. And finally, the thing to keep in mind is those districts themselves tend to be the most under-resourced districts. They don't have a warehouse of laptops. They don't have a warehouse of hotspots.
Or online learning platforms.
Right.
Some of them have not made that district-wide investment.
Right.
So should schools think about alternatives to closure, given that you have raised some of these very salient issues?
I think it's going to be a tough call, but we have to be thoughtful about it because it's not as simple as let's be hyper cautious because it's okay, everyone can miss a little bit of school, nothing really matters. We know for a subset of kids we've talked about, it really matters. Mm-hmm. And they're going to bear a cost for the school being closed. If we have no other choice, if it's a real matter of true public health emergency, that's one thing. But if it's a matter of just being super cautious, I think we have to be very thoughtful of the unintended consequences of doing that. And if we plan to do it, how we can mobilize more supports than just a Zoom-based, video-based lesson.
And lastly, do you have any thoughts about how schools might work to minimize the disruption if they have to close? What can schools do to minimize the disruption? And what do you think that maybe families can do to help to support students when their schools are closed?
I think, think about like ways to build support networks for kids and families. So it's not just we'll give you access to a computer and a teacher teaching that computer, but how can we knit several families together to support each other?
That's a great idea.
How can we knit in high school just groups of kids to support each other?
Sure.
And think about creating small teams and say this is your support team, and they could maybe as long as no one is sick,
yes.
they can all meet together. And that peer-based support has been showing to be a really much as powerful as just the video interaction.
That's
so I
great.
think, again, and then I think the third thing would be to working with local social service agencies and nonprofits to can they fill the gap for things like mental health supports and recreation. So we really have to think about the whole child.
Yes.
And what the whole child is missing when school is closed, and make sure that our supports, if we have to close school, are the full whole child supports and not just narrowly. If we give you a lesson, we're okay.
I like this idea because what you're prescribing suggests that we need to keep contact and communication lines open for students, despite whether the physical building is available.
Right. And think of ways that to use the media they use every day, their cell phones, their Instagram accounts.
Absolutely.
Go to them as we figure out the ways to keep the connection going.
Those are great ideas. Well, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Balfanz, for being a guest today. And I'd like to thank you, our viewer, for being part of our discussion for the Center for Safe and Healthy Schools as we talk about coronavirus and schools. Thank you. I'm Annette Anderson. Thank you again for joining us.
Good day.
Good.